Okay, that's me. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dan Bell from the Hampton Roads Innovation Collaborative, your regional tech council. Thank you for your attendance. We very much appreciate you having interest in the programs that we provide. HRIC is a 501c6 nonprofit. We're volunteer only, and we work to help the efforts in this region to promote technology, promote entrepreneurism, and essentially developing benefits for the regional economy. Tech Tuesday is an ongoing series sponsored by Cox. And with that, I'm going to ask my friend and colleague, Mr. Barrett Stork, to say a few words.
Thanks, Dan. Hey, everybody. Thank you, as always, for allowing us to continue sponsoring this great program. Love being a member of HRIC. And really love supporting this type of initiative to help ensure that our region continues to grow and prosper. And with that growth and prosperity, we continue to invest in our fiber network here in the region. Some of you may have seen an announcement we made last week regarding additional funding that we are bringing to the region to continue building out more fiber for our customers, to give them that multi-gigabit speed that they are looking for in the home. That's something that we're already doing for businesses, but we've talked about this for a while. And I think some folks who've been on here before have heard me mention that our goal is to bring 10 gigabit symmetrical speeds to the home for all of our customers in our entire footprint. So a lot of exciting things. Glad that we could be here to support this, and look forward to hearing what our speakers have to say today. Thanks, Dan.
All right, thanks, Barrett. Yeah, this is going to be a great program. We started off thinking state of regional ecosystem in Hampton Roads, and that kind of broadened into how can we be better equipped and ready to have our young businesses support corporate, government, other clientele, essentially growing their businesses and growing the economy. So some of us, the older ones in the crowd, have seen Silicon Valley in action. I'm one of those, being the oldest person on this a call, if you will, at least on the screen. And so there was some things that happened there that were magical and maybe never able to be repeated. But the fact is that there were a lot of things that could be repeated. And I think that we're trying to do some great things in this region. The question remains, how can we turn the corner? And I think that our panelists are going to provide some wonderful insight there. Let me just do a quick introduction. I'm going to go around the screen, the way it's displayed on the screen, so no particular order. Mr. Marty Kazabowski, who's CIT's new mentor, tech mentor for the ICAP program. Sorry if I butchered that too much, Marty, but you can certainly correct that. Mr. Brad Scott, founder and CEO and top man for Seaton Corporation in Chesapeake. Mr. Peter Wallace, the CIO of City of Virginia Beach. Tim Ryan, Startwheel. Monique Adams for 757 Angels, and Evans McMillian, who has joined us from 757 Accelerate. Evans, thank you. You were just in time, so we're getting started. But with that, I would like to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Mr. Marty Kazabowski, who will lead the conversation. Note that chat is available throughout the whole session to ask questions. Marty may take it in stride or during the course of the conversation, or we may block some time at the end to group them up. It's really, we'll just see how it lays out. So with that, I'm going to go off screen, Marty, and turn it over to you. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dan. Yes, I'm going to sort of moderate the panel a little bit here. I'll try to keep a light touch, but a couple of opening remarks, I guess. First off, I did recently just change jobs. I'm no longer with ODU, although my former boss is on the line. I'm actually now with the ICAP program, the Innovation Commercialization Assistance Program, as the tech mentor for the Hampton Roads region, although that is actually a statewide mandate as well, depending on who we interact with. It's actually run through George Mason University, but the SBDC, the Small Business Development Center, is the key organization there. So just to set the record straight. A couple opening remarks. We use this word ecosystem nowadays. We didn't do that back in the day. but it's a good metaphor. And it's a metaphor that I think a lot of us mostly understand, but maybe haven't really defined. And I think we're not going to do that today. But I do want to point out two features of the metaphor that I think apply here. One is, a fully functioning ecosystem has everybody involved. So in this case, we're talking about some big companies, some small companies, some major employers, growing companies. Everybody has to be involved for the ecosystem to function the way it should. And to that point, everybody has to be not only involved, but everybody has a role to play. And it's not helpful to be in a place where it's easy to start a company and grow a company and then find out that you can't find the customers and the partners and the other helpful organizations, and you end up moving. And Hampton Roads has a long history of people starting great companies here and then moving places that we don't go to. So what we'd like to do is find ways to engage everybody in the community into the ecosystem and make sure they understand the role they're going to play. So some of that's going to come out in the conversation today as I hand it off. The other thing I want to point out, and I want at no time do I want to have anybody think that we haven't made tremendous progress here. Those of us who go back a ways on this thing, remember when it was very difficult to get this kind of group together. Nowadays, we have so much brain power, so much energy, so much passion involved in this that I think if we accomplish anything today, it's convincing ourselves again that we've made tremendous progress and continue to do so. So we're going to talk about some things we can do better, we can do faster, but I don't want anybody to think we're not doing pretty well compared to where we used to be. So with that as sort of the backdrop, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hand it off. And again, I'll go around the way they're organized on my screen here. Each one of the panelists will say a couple of words about their organization, and then particularly one or two hot buttons that they think we need to really keep at front of mind as we go forward in growing the ecosystem. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand it off first to Monique, who is enjoying her vacation. Say a few words and let us know what's on your mind, and then I'll go around the group as we go. So go ahead, Monique.
Hi, thanks, Dan and Marty, and thanks everybody for participating today. Not much of a vacation, as I've mentioned before, but a vacation nonetheless. I'm Monique Adams, as Marty has mentioned, and I am the executive director of 757 Angels. Most of you know that 757 Angels is the capital arm of an organization called 757 Collab, which I'll describe to you momentarily. 757 Angels has invested $82 million into 39 companies. For 3 consecutive years, we've been named as a top 3 angel group in the nation, which is an incredible recognition for our region and for our group. Our organization and the capital that we've invested has resulted in the creation of over 1,000 high-paying jobs, 427 just in the last year. And those high-paying jobs have enormous ripple effects. So very excited to be here from the 757 Angels perspective. Also, I manage the 757 Collab. 757 Collab harnesses the power of 757 Angels, 757 Accelerate, and the 757 Startup Studios. So capital, programming, accelerator, incubator, which creates a really important and critical continuum for companies at all stages of development. And the Collab essentially provides coordinating services, operational, financial, and strategic oversight. We have a board, which is composed of a cross-section of key players in the ecosystem, anchored by some key founders that we have on that board. So really excited to be here with you today.
Monique, before you go, just one or two things you think we need to really think about and work on in the ecosystem as we go forward.
Yeah, thanks. So one of the things that I have been thinking about is collaboration. I think that we all need to understand that the number one measurement across the country of a robust ecosystem is density. And density is really measured by the number of founders. So all of these people and all of this great energy is all assembled here to fuel the founders that have the great ideas and are building businesses in our community. And in order to do that, collaboration is absolutely critical and key. We don't have enough founders in any one city. We don't have enough founders in any one vertical. However, if we work together, there has been an incredible groundswell of momentum of founders at every single stage of development from across the region. And we're starting to see some successes, which is really, really critical. These successes are what is going to encourage corporates and other key players to get involved and to get active in the ecosystem. And so what it's really, really critical is for us to all work together, create robust partnerships, and focus on partnering rather than replicating or duplicating activities. So collaboration is key across geography, across verticals, across all sorts of cross sections of this ecosystem. Collaboration is key. I think the number two thing that I would like to focus on, and there's a number of things that hot buttons that we should be focusing on, but is diversity. Recently, we had Techstars. We commissioned Techstars to do a report for us. That report was distributed in March. There was interviewing of a number of founders, hundreds of founders, as well as ecosystem players. And the results of that report were really not surprising. And the number one gap was the inclusion gap. So our ecosystem, the constituents of our ecosystem do not represent the population of our community. We need a more diverse ecosystem. At 757 CoLab, we're really excited. Some of you may have seen the recent announcement. We have hired a new director of diversity, equity, and inclusion and strategic partnerships. And he's being charged with actually identifying and developing programs, identifying underrepresented, socially, economically disadvantaged founders, to make sure that we can get them the type of programming that they need so we can build more businesses in our area. That's going to be healthy for our entire community and provide incredible economic ripple effects for the entire region. So collaboration and diversity across race, across gender, across industry, across geography, you name it, we need a more diverse ecosystem.
Couldn't agree more. If we're not collaborating and collaborating with everybody, then we're not really collaborating. All
That's
right, so I'm just going to go to the next one here in no particular order. Pete Wallace, tell us about what you're up to and maybe one of your hot buttons.
All right, so I have spent most of my career both in the private sector as well as the public sector. At this point in my life, I'm thinking maybe it's a half and half. So definitely getting up there in age, but at the same time, I want to say that from a city perspective, from a government, maybe 10 years ago, if you mentioned regional cooperation, you're talking about just within your own city. I think that has changed now. Marty, you made the point that things are getting better. And I think regionally, we have definitely gotten better. The challenge is there for all of us. I think, as we know, disruptive technology has taken a rapid pace in how we do things. We got to be competitive and a more global front. So you can't afford to be silo. So I think when it comes to my keywords, it is about breaking that silos down. And completely the shift in our citizens and the consumer demands is changing all the time. The pandemic just shows how robust we have to be for infrastructure to make sure that we can meet the new norm, whether it be telemedicine, telework, or, so these kind of things that we have to be prepared for what's next. And we can no longer do it as a single city, all right? Our government, we have to really take part. And I'm glad to see my fellow peer Chuck Williams on here, because right now when it comes to regional collaboration, the regional ring is one of those things that we're working on to really enhance Hampton Roads. not just the 5 cities within the South Side, but the entire Hampton Roads, because we believe Hampton Roads having at least, up to like 1.5 million or so people, we are a force to be reckoned with. And if we don't think in original and cooperate originally, we're going to miss the mark of how we really can do business with a bigger presence than what we have. So I think that's changing. And that was hard because when it comes to politics, it's very territorial. And I believe that people starting to see that a net gain really for the region is when you have something new, not robbing from each other, from each city to pay for each other. So I think that's the key as we continue to go forward in meeting the challenges is again, collaboration. And I think diversity part is very good because we see the competitive edge. They need to have strategic goals and to have models that when you approach innovation, it all capture part of the ecosystem that each regional cities here have to offer. You take a look at Norfolk and what they bring, take Chesapeake and what they bring, and the beach and so on. You can see where everyone's strength really enhance the entire districts, the entire region, not just its own focus on that. So I think that's where we continue to need to have value exchange between the diverse talent and a broad source of shared capabilities and intelligence across the region.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Pete. Yeah, and it's I'll second all that. It's great to see Chuck. And by the way, I noticed that my old colleague and friend Rusty Waterfield, who was CIO at ODU, has joined us as well. And I think there's certainly a role to be played by by those large organizations like universities. By the way, universities know a little bit about politics too. So just so you know. So that's great. It's good. By the way, I am going to at some point ask the question, if others don't, is how does a state, or how does a city, how does a university, how does a large enterprise begin to interact with the founders that Monique was talking about earlier? And how can we better institutionalize some of those relationships? So put that in the back of your mind. That'll come up a little bit later. All right, next up, I want to go to, let's go to Brad. Brad Scott, tell us what you're up to and one of your hot buttons from your perspective.
Sure. Thank you. I'm Brad Scott, President and CEO of Seton Corporate, an enterprise IT company here in Chesapeake. Actually, all of our employees are distributed across the country. We'll talk about that. Also recently co-founded a startup, an IT technology startup in the waste management industry. And in addition, we can talk in a bit as well, I'm also the past president of the local chapter for entrepreneurs organization, or EO, and we'll talk about some of those things as we get into it. I think one of the things that I would say the hot button is there's a tons of resources. If you look at, as we hear from Monique, we heard from her, we're going to hear from Evans, Tim, just the broad availability within the ecosystem for entrepreneurs. I think really what entrepreneurs need to do, the entrepreneurial mindset is, at least, for me, and a lot of entrepreneurs, is, hey, we can do this on our own, right? It's very lonely. So my recommendation for entrepreneurs is tap into that ecosystem, get the help that's there for you, because it's only going to help you grow and keep your sanity in the process.
Great. Yeah, I'd love to learn more about EO. You and I have chatted about this over the years. I do think that's probably an underutilized asset. And it's a good point. We've got a lot of underutilized assets in the region. Universities, Norfolk State comes to mind, for example. So let's keep that in mind. I'm going to go next to Tim, who I routinely joke about having one of the coolest jobs and certainly the best hair in Hampton Roads. So Tim, what's on your plate these days, and give us a hot button or two.
Well, thanks, Marty. I appreciate that. No pressure, especially as I age with this whole hair thing. I mean, if it starts to thin out, I'm in really, really big trouble. But I am the executive director of Startwheel. And what Startwheel is we consolidate, coordinate, and celebrate the entrepreneurial efforts that take place across Hampton Roads. So as we've heard today, 1.5, 1.6, 1.7 million people, whatever the case is, lots of localities, lots of universities, lots of military bases, all of which have a really large entrepreneurial component to them. So if somebody wants to get involved within the entrepreneurial space in this region, oftentimes they don't know where to start. They don't know how to get connected. So Startwheel solves that problem as an online platform. We have a consolidated calendar. We share the news of the successes that everybody has, and we try to bring down those barriers that entrepreneurs have and face when they start their venture. In terms of some hot button items, I don't know if it's necessarily a hot button item, but one thing that I do want to share with the people that are listening today is that when you hear the word founder, a lot of times we automatically think of college dropout, young person that doesn't have a lot of experience and they have to prove their way to be successful. And that's not always the case. I mean, as there are people that will do that, or they'll start something when they graduate from college, a lot of founders, they come from other large businesses that are in this audience. So they identify a better way of doing things, and the company doesn't necessarily align with that mentality. So they leave the company and they start something. So it is a mixture of age and maturity from that standpoint. So they leave and they start something. And when they start, they start as a team of one or a team of two. So when it comes to that collaboration piece, they just can't assign a business development person to go contact this organization or that organization to establish some sort of partnership or collaboration event, because they are as a team of one or a team of two. So, keep that in mind, as you hear of these different companies, to reach out to them, be patient with them. As I said, they've been there, they've done that many, many times. So they're very, very good at what they do. They don't have the resources they have until they have them. Next thing you know, you land some funding from 757 Angels, and now you're on a hiring spree, and you got to hire all these people because the investors want to see a return. So, again, that reinforces that we all have to work together so that we can meet those needs. And finally, a lot of times people just don't know who to reach out to. They don't know who the right person is to contact in order to establish that, just to get the collaboration started. So those are the couple of things that I have for you, Marty.
Look at that. That's a good point. We should discuss this later if we get time. That is an important role that the big organizations play. Is their people like to start things, and sometimes it can't work inside the organization, so off they go. And if you look at some of the functioning ecosystems around, Austin, Boston, Silicon Valley, Florida, Northern Virginia. People don't remember that so much of what happened in Northern Virginia was because AOL was shedding people right and left, starting new companies. And we will come to a point sometime where we have some of those large, those founders growing large companies, where the next step is the people spin out and start their own thing, and then maybe come back when it doesn't work. It's that back and forth flow. And again, it goes to my earlier point about how everybody has to be involved and engaged, and there's enlightened self-interest for large companies, large employers to do this. All right, so last on our panel, but certainly not least, and maybe the best last name for this business, is Evans McMillan. So Evans, what's on your list these days, and what's your hot buttons?
Thanks, Marty, and thanks everyone for being here and putting this together. So I run 757 Accelerate, which, as Monique already set the table, is one of 3 resources here under 757 CoLab. We are a 13-week mentor-driven, milestone-based traditional accelerator program focused on providing the right thing at the right time to founders who are in the high-growth, tech-enabled, scalable, multi-market business effectively. We give each of the companies a $20,000 non-dilutive check during the program. We connect them with all kinds of subject matter experts, wrap them in resources, get them investor ready, and then take them on a 4 or 5 city roadshow tour, depending on COVID. Which means we get in a bus and we drive to Northern Virginia, and we go into a conference room with 35 strangers from Northern Virginia who are early stage investors, and bring our dog and pony show to North Carolina, to Charlottesville, to Richmond, to Hampton Roads at 757 Angels. And we're really piggybacking on the success, the early stage success of the Angel Group. To date, we've had 27 companies go through the program. They have raised collectively over $46 million in equity capital or convertible notes. They have raised over $10 million in non-dilutive capital, 238 jobs, 68% underrepresented founders in that group, and 1,400 mentor hours. And hard to track, but at least $20 million in revenue. So super excited about those numbers in the last 4 years. Again, building on sort of the early stage work at the Angel Group. They have been a great attraction vehicle, and certainly all the founders that go through that are ready come through the process at 757 Angels and go through that investment vetting process, and that's a great learning experience. I will say it's been really awesome to have our first set of founders go through the studios at 757 Startup Studios, earlier stage founders, then be accelerator ready, and then apply to the Angels. So the continuum is starting to really work. The hot buttons are, for me, I guess I would say opportunities. There's nothing that these guys have said that I don't agree with. And so it's almost like now I'm the last person and I have to say something rather than that mine is the most important, or that it's, I wouldn't have said, the little kangaroo said me too. I guess I would say corporate partnerships, partly because that's what we're here for. We've had some early corporate partners who've really seen the value, both as a recruiting tool and as an opportunity to create the virtuous cycle that Tim was talking about what else is here, what else is going on in the community. They have mostly been companies who, like a Ferguson Ventures, Ferguson that has a venture arm that's already looking ahead. That's their culture. That's where they're already investing internally into innovation in the future and trying to stay ahead and see that as, from a business case, they see that as a competitive advantage for them. They've come alongside, served on the Angels board, served on the Accelerate board, been engaged, been sponsors. They sponsored a company in our 2019 cohort and then offered them hours and hours of industry specific mentorship. And then, I've had the benefit of having some of their next level leadership come to the Angels member meetings and see really high quality pitches and what an investment opportunity looks like. So I think getting more corporates, the collaboration, again, this riffs on what everybody else said, so I don't want to suggest I'm having, reinventing the wheel here, but getting corporates to see the value, or at least open the window to early pilot opportunities, to becoming early customers, to seeing the value to their staff of mentorship, and offering the industry expertise, having a company in the home decor space be able to sit with somebody who did nothing but hotels and hospitality at Ferguson for years was priceless. And they enjoy, more often than not, the mentors say they got more out of it than the founders did. So I would say that's one of the things that, I think access to early stage capital, it's a really heavy load for the Angels to be carrying that entirely on their own. So I guess, more reliable early stage capital for people who don't have friends and family, that's an assumption a lot of people make. And especially when you're really intentionally focused on serving underrepresented founders, which we define as women and people of color and military veterans, the assumption that people have friends and family is often not rooted in the facts. So I guess I would say that really early stage, they can set the Angel Group up to take it from there, but they can't be the only source of capital, reliable early stage capital in the region.
Yeah, agreed. Oddly enough, that's a very good segue to what I wanted to get to next, which really is kind of the subject that we're orbiting around is, so we've gotten some successes, in the last year or two of founders who have managed to form some relationship with some of the major employers, the port, the ODU, a few others, Ferguson, but it's been ad hoc and it's been hit and miss. So I want to kind of toss it out to the panel, whoever wants to jump in here. How do we actually do that? What are the nuts and bolts of finding one of these founders and helping them form a relationship with an ODU or a Centera or a Dollar Tree or a Norfolk Southern or a Smithfield Foods or somebody like that? How do we actually do that? Anybody want to jump in?
I'm just going to jump in real quick, and then I'd love for others to follow on. I think the first thing, in order to get the corporates interested, we have to educate the corporates on the value proposition that the founders can provide to them before we make the connection. Otherwise, there'll be a lack of interest. And so creating a forum with corporates to sort of elaborate on that value proposition. What we have learned with the corporates in our ecosystem is that they are focused on a couple different things. The first thing is economic development. They are very, very much focused on economic development in the region, in the Hampton Roads region. And many of them, because they're large corporates, are also have a statewide footprint. So they're also interested in economic development in the state. And they like to align with startups because they create jobs and they're an economic engine in the economy. The second big thing is professional development. So far you haven't heard me say anything about new ideas, new technology, new innovation. It's been economic development and professional development. And they've been able to achieve that by providing subject matter expertise or acting as mentors to founders. And that's been really good. The third way that you can provide value is actually sort of selling this scouting new innovative technologies. And that's actually started to work. Again, you have to have a density of founders, like where we started with this conversation, to be able to sort of provide enough opportunity to them where something might hit. But that is actually interesting to corporates as well. So, you know, I think the fourth way that they can do it is actually then in that connection. So if you can articulate the value proposition, economic development, alignment with the innovation community, alignment with the future economy, professional development, workforce development, and then scouting of new technologies, you might be able to make a connection where a corporate can make a highly valuable contribution by acting as a first customer or as a test bed for these founders, which is going to be necessary to actually retain these founders in our community. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, I'll open up to the other guys too, but I will second the idea of being a first customer. I mean, I really do believe that a lot of the cities, the universities, the major corporations, if they did nothing but test drive a lot of these cool ideas, they'd really win. Pete, you turned off your mute, so go at it.
Yeah, so I think Monique said something here that's obviously critical. Number one, value, right? You know, she's talking about value. Sometimes the people around us are not aware of the value that we bring. Even from organization, you know, how many times have you seen, if you take an IT, for example, what they have technology-wise, they have no idea how to really communicate that, convey that to departments. So you tend to look for something that you already have. So I think understanding your value and what you bring proposition-wise. The second part of it is, you know, we have some great schools in the area. You know, we got ODU, we have Norfolk State and others in region. And I think the talent that we need to really grow from the ecosystem needs to stay here. I think typically we lose those in Northern Virginia, and we really have to concentrate on how do we make that happen. And the value again comprises of what are the trends, what do we need? If we're gonna have interns from colleges, how do we prepare the interns to come work for the corporations or for the cities so that when they come with some defined skill set that's needed? That could have Brett a lot when he wants to have maybe some people come and work for him. Same thing with the city. So I think having those connections and the value that all the programs bring together originally does help us retain that talent that we need here to grow. And back to the ring, you know, we also looking at higher ed. So we also working with hospitals and higher eds to make sure that ring encompasses not just the technology and connecting 5 cities from a disaster recovery, but also from research, and the capacity needed to do all those researches is also attainable. Great.
Thanks, Pete. Tim, you've gone off mute. That's the universal symbol for I want to talk.
No, I think I agree with what was said. What I would add is one thing that the way that founders spell love is T-I-M-E. They just want time. And so if you can, a lot of people think that, gosh, I can't help startups, I can't help founders because I can't write a check for X amount of dollars or whatever. But I encourage people to spend time with these founders, find out what their needs are. And a lot of times, I mean, it is your network is really, really going to be invaluable. I mean, if you look at Uber from a standpoint of before they had funding, if they weren't able to go toe to toe against taxi cab unions and the laws that were in place, they wouldn't be what they are today. But through a network, they found somebody and they navigated that political landscape, and the rest is history. So spend some time with the founders, open up your network to them, and that's how they spell love.
Yeah, well, I can't second that enough. Evans knows this. We had one of the members of the current cohort of 757 Accelerate get a connection to ODU, and just the idea that she could sit there on a Zoom with essentially the chief financial officer and the guy who owns parking and food service and all that stuff, and learn about what makes his world work was a tremendously successful thing. On both sides, because then he got some access to a technology and idea that he never would have gotten. So yeah, you're right. That spelling love TIME is a very good thing as a takeaway here. Anybody else want to jump in? If not, we've got a question from Rick Severinghouse. He says, on collaboration, I'd be interested in panelists' comments on what drivers are in place or should be to increase collaboration. How do we actually establish this value proposition? How do we literally get these people in a room and convince them that they should act more like Ferguson and less like someone else?
So are you asking things that people in this room could do, or things that can be done on a larger scale? I'm asking the question asker.
Yeah, I'm not sure the answer to that
Richard.
question. Yeah, obviously, I hope everybody takes away something to do today. But even if go with the larger issue, how do we as a region begin to put that connective tissue in place so that our large corporates and other employers can really see that value proposition?
I think, if I may,
Well,
I think that
People,
Go ahead, Monique.
I'll be real quick. I think the first thing is education and awareness. I think we need to create awareness of the ecosystem and the value that it can provide to local economies, and that it can't exist in silos. So the first thing is education and awareness. And then sort of creating those first meetings. The second thing is much more difficult, and I'll let others take it from here. And that's just a cultural reset. We have to recognize that we have to work together to achieve our ultimate goal in terms of creating a future innovation economy. We have to collaborate, we have to work together. And cultural reset and change making, Evans and I talk about this all the time. It's the absolute hardest part of our job. But I think education, awareness, and cultural reset is where it has to start. And then there might be a lot of other mechanics and things that we can do. But I just wanted to offer that as a thought.
Yeah, appreciate that. But so how active do we have to be on that? Do I need to call Doug Smith and have him call a meeting of all the CIOs in Hampton Roads and
Yes.
convince them? Yeah. How active do we need to be on that?
Yeah, very active. I think we need roundtables where we bring the cities together, we bring stakeholders together. I think we need to be very active about doing those sorts of things.
Okay, I agree. Anybody else want to jump in on that one? Evans?
Yeah, I was going to say that I feel like one of the things that's impactful here is it's an invitation.
Mhm.
And I think people don't, I mean, you could talk about this more, but I do feel like people do what they're incentivized to do, and everybody's busy and people have a lot of mouths to feed, and inviting and then paying people. I mean, I think one of the things that if there weren't so many administrative hurdles, the concept behind sharing in the benefits of two municipalities or areas working together financially, starting to pay people, in the economic development realm for, incentivizing them for actually collaborating and then sharing in the impact of what they would got because they work together. So I feel like, I just was late because I was meeting with the folks at Hampton University, and we just said, here's what we do. What do you do? Here's what we need. Okay, here are some really quick ways we can collaborate. Let's share in one piece of programming. Let's share at least 10 mentor names. But it's because we sat down and we said, by the end of this, we're going to commit to 3 things that we're going to share.
Right.
And they're going to be things that you need and we need, and let's sort and sift until we found something. But we held ourselves, I'm only underscoring what you said, but we held ourselves accountable to, we're going to pick 3 things. And until people are measured that way, incentivized, paid, get raises because they work together, it's really, it feels like a lot of conversation until it's some sort of economic benefit for people. So I think paying people for sharing in those opportunities and saying collaboration is worth paying for, I think it's going to be harder for governments to do it. I think we do it all the time because we know we need each other, but we're sort of down in the weeds and the grassroots level.
Yeah, agreed. Anyone else? Go ahead, Pete.
So, the word I want to use is intentional. It have to be, right? It's interesting in government among the CIOs, we don't compete against each other. We kind of help, we share, because we're not running against each other for, the best widget of the week. So that it become natural for the CIOs to do that. But, it's really, when you think about the corporation, it's kind of intuitive to a founder, right? When you think about business being first to market, making sure I have my products in place in line so I could get a jump on the market, for example. That necessarily doesn't come right away, okay? To how you're going to collaborate. I want to make sure that I learn from you, but without giving away my secrets. So I think we have to really look at the legacy part and go, okay, I do need everyone to be here. Again, going back to the talent that we have, we're not competing against each other. We're really competing against another region. And if we think that mindset of how we break that down and say, how can we help versus compete? And again, being intentional, I think there's probably a way to bridge that gap.
Yeah, Pete, that's well said. I like the word intentional. I like the word sustained as well. We've seen some of this movie before where the large organizations have engaged a little bit and then found that it's a little harder and longer time frames than they might like. And I think having that intentional and committed and sustained approach to this is going to be key to getting them engaged. So, by the way, I hope you guys are maybe paying attention to the chat. We've got a couple of good comments. Nancy mentioned, partnerships with the Alliance and reInvent. We mentioned Doug Smith earlier. And the chambers, I think, play a role in this as well. So yeah, the more the merrier. And as Monique said, yeah, I think active is better than just sort of waiting for it to happen. So any other comments on this notion of getting the big guys involved? Nope.
Well, I think Marty, with that, getting the big guys involved, it's getting started with or continuing things like this, right? I think you really keyed it up well. If we're doing a lot of good stuff, if you continue these types of efforts and bringing those together, that's when the big companies and the big organizations, they're going to notice that. They're going to say, wow, you're really doing some good stuff. We're the big fish, but we're missing out, right? Because you're swarming us. So I think that's a very key thing to continue to do.
Yeah, agreed. Well, we just got a helpful note in the chat from McCarran Thomas offering the help of Congressman Luria, which we appreciate. I'm sure Drew would offer the senator's support as well. So, are there any other comments or questions from the group, from the assembled masses? I'd love to hear other thoughts on how this works and how we sort of particularly build that education component, how we get more people aware of what's going on here. Tim.
Yeah, I think the one thing that's really interesting that we've thankfully been in a position to kind of forget about is the region really comes together whenever there's a threat of a carrier group that's going to leave. And I mean, we are so fortunate to have the supporting components to something like the world's largest Navy. But I mean, if something was to leave, all of the customers are then gone. And I mean, there's just the ripple effect is really, it's just huge. So, we have to remind each other that we have to have this mindset of we need to support one another. Life is really good right now, but just as COVID, things can change really fast. Yeah. And we need to think about how we can support one another before the time comes, before we're caught short and we're back on our heels and we can't respond fast enough. I mean, you take a trip to Kansas City where they're landlocked and they have a thriving entrepreneurial ecosystem there, and they know they have to support one another. And the thought of going out and buying or supporting an outside organization, it just doesn't happen. And we need to remind ourselves that we need to support one another as well.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And some of you might recall this, but I used to wander around town giving a presentation I used to call the Tale of Four Cities. And the four cities were my hometown of Detroit, I usually picked one of the former Soviet state cities that I travel to every so often, Danville, Virginia. Those are 3 of them. And each one of those suffered a near-death experience, sometimes fairly recently. The end of the auto industry in 2008, the end of tobacco and textiles in Danville, the end of the Soviet Union in the 90s. All of them are building their way back based on a culture of innovation, a sense of urgency they have to move forward. The 4th city, of course, was Hampton Roads. And the question I would always leave on the table is what you just said, Tim. Do we need that near-death experience before we really begin to collaborate and begin to see the value of everybody being involved in the ecosystem? And like I said earlier, I think we're doing amazing things, but there's still some work to do on that topic.
Right.
And I hope we can keep the sense of urgency that we've had recently. So any other thoughts or comments on that topic? If there's other comments or thoughts, please put them in the chat and I'll get them to the panelists. Let me go back to the thing we really haven't talked a lot about, and that's workforce development. I mean, you're part of the, we've alluded to it a few times, but you're part of the culture of innovation and the part of the growing this sort of attachment and the connective tissues between bigs and smalls and everyone else are those people that we either retain here or we become so cool that all the kids want to move here. How do we keep that going? How do we keep that sort of sense of place at top of mind as we go forward? Tim, you're the coolest guy on the call. What do you got on that?
Well, for me, talking to founders, I mean, things that I would really like to see from a workforce standpoint is, how can we get, if we know we need there's just the demand for tech is just huge, and it's only getting in more and more in demand as we speak. Web3 is going to be pulling more developers. I mean, and what are we doing to be put in place? Founders don't necessarily care if things are accredited or non-accredited. How can we fill classrooms, empty conference rooms at buildings, have these the experts teaching at night to teach the kids the things that they need to learn so that they can go in and start these jobs. Because otherwise we're kind of stuck in the sense of we're going to have to hire outside, or have to relocate to wherever we can find the talent. That's look at what we have, look at the talent we have, leverage that, and then build upon that. And one of the ways that we can do that is teaching our workforce here, understanding what it is, and then implementing it. But I mean, to points that were made earlier, I mean, what other place, we all know this stuff. What other place can you live where you have the ocean, you have the mountains, you have DC, you have everything around us, and the cost of living is really, really low. I mean, we put that piece in place, and I think it changes the conversation.
Well, yeah, that's good. Let me riff on that. Other guys who want to jump in here and ask a question or whatever, feel free. But one of the things that I've gotten energized about recently is I interact a lot with people overseas and other parts of the country who are all out there touting the coolness of their ecosystem. And there are places like Startup Genome Project and Startup Blink and others who measure the robustness of an ecosystem and then report it to the world, and they rank them. Silicon Valley and Berlin and London and Austin. And Hampton Roads never shows up on those lists. And I think there's a couple of reasons why. I just want to get your comments on this one. One is, we have 18 different political subdivisions, and they all capture data in their own ways, and nobody reports it up and aggregates it. And then there's really no one there who is going to tell the story to the rest of the world. How do we do a better job at capturing the data? The number of startup founders we have, the successes they're having, the patents they're generating, the partnerships, the acquisitions, all that sort of stuff. How do we capture that data and then make the world aware of it?
So I'm going to just jump in because I have to tune out in a minute. We are a metrics-driven organization. We capture data like nobody's business, and we've studied other ecosystems and the data that is being collected. And look, there's a common thread that runs through the type of data that's being collected. So when I first started this job, I remember folks saying like, nobody knows what to report because there's so many different things. That's actually really not the case. There is some very basic things that need to be collected. And we do collect those things. What I would suggest on this call is it goes back to collaboration. If we could all get in a room around a table and talk about, and actually we're doing this at the state level. I'm on the Virginia Innovation Partnership Authority Board. And we actually have a call tomorrow, and we are going to agree on the 5 or 6 things just as a starting point that the state is going to report on as far in terms of innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystems. And so if we could do that locally as a group, and then we could get into the mechanics and the weeds in terms of who's going to be charged with sort of collecting that data, how frequently that data is collected. But we all need to get into the room, and we all need to agree to provide our data. And I think we can easily agree on, 5 or 6 different things that we'll be reporting on.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Yeah, and as a former CIT board member, we talked about that at great length. So it's great to see that VIPA is continuing that. That's good stuff. All right, Evans, you're off mute.
We've worked hard on, just to follow up on that, we worked hard on gathering all of our metrics and taking the ones that we've worked on that are grant driven, but also are sort of what is actually what founders care about. And again, we're really trying to stay focused on what's helpful to the founders, knowing that if we can drive that kind of stickiness, then the impacts flow from there. But we collect a lot of that data, and then we've shared it. Just the recent sort of regional statewide impact that we tried to put together with like just accelerator side and capital side with Lighthouse Labs and Ramp and Roanoke, and just trying to get, it wasn't that it was hard. We are collecting all the same things. It's just that if the data is being collected, and I think someone said this in the chat, it's being collected, it's just not being shared necessarily. And then other folks who are delivering a lot of programs for some reason aren't reporting that data. That doesn't suggest they're not collecting it, but there's no way to see it from any outsider. So we put out our impact reports publicly all the time, at least once a year. And so that's the kind of thing that's a signal from our end, at least, that like, hey, we're open for business. Like, we're happy to share. This is what we're doing. If you're tapping into these same things, let's see where we can. That's an effort to be transparent about how we measure our progress.
Yeah. Interesting you say that, because we've got a comment from SCRVE Consulting, who I don't know, but says the data is being captured. It's just a matter of technology and distribution, right? Aggregating it and then having somebody who's responsible for telling the world. And I think we're still missing some activities there. So, Pete, did you have something to say on this?
Yeah, so I'm going to use a phrase that don't let the crisis go to waste. And with all this disruption that we have in technology, this pandemic, and people teleworking, we can really take advantage of that, knowing that the cost of living, as mentioned before, is lower than Northern Virginia. And, we saw what happened in the snowstorm last week up there. People get stranded on traffic. We got to be more intentional, again, of how we propose ourselves. We don't want to be the best seeker here. A lot of that also goes to the cultural mindset, if you will, of allowing more teleworks, because retention of what we have also is at risk. We have seen many people who have left the Hampton Roads lately to go somewhere else because they are not getting more money elsewhere, and they could work remotely and so they go back to where they came from. And so I think that's also something that got to be part of the mix as we take a look at how we're going to build an ecosystem, is also retention.
Okay, great. Yeah, appreciate that. Hey, we're going to lose Monique here in about 30 seconds. Monique, enjoy your vacation. If you have any other thoughts, feel free to send them in after the fact, and we'll get them out to the group. But I did want to get back to one of the things that Monique introduced at the beginning, which is diversity, right? I think as a region, we are less good than we should be at engaging a much different set of demographics into these kind of conversations. And I see Kayla Fleming's on with us. I see some other folks who are deeply engaged in that sort of stuff. Again, nuts and bolts. How do we actually make those connections and bring those populations into these kind of discussions? Is this an education issue? Is this a telling the story issue? How do we actually do this better? It's hard.
Well, I think first and foremost, one of the things that people have to do is expand their network outside of what they currently have. So, if you want to introduce diversity, into the equation, everyone needs to look at who their inner circle is. And if that inner circle is not diverse to begin with, then it's beginning to be really, really difficult to make it diverse. So how are we going out there, going back again to giving the founders love by giving them time? So how are you going out there talking to founders, giving them the time to talk about the problems that they're solving so that you can help them? That's what I would encourage people to do.
Good, agreed. Brad, you're off mute. You're up.
Yeah, I would 100% second what Tim said. I know with EO Entrepreneurs Organization, our local chapter, diversity, we were not diverse at all 10 years ago, right? But exactly as Tim said, it's one of the things that we struggled with, but it was just a matter of just opening up our circles. And once we started tapping into those other circles in the ecosystem, I think we're up to like 20% diverse now. I got the new numbers. So when you go from less than a single digit, maybe a fraction to that, is that where we want to be? Absolutely not. But I think that's phenomenal from a diversity perspective. And we also found that being diverse within our entrepreneurial companies, diverse, and I think Monique said it early on, just also within the different industries. Obviously, we have technology, we have all of the professional firms, if you will, legal, accounting, finance. We have high-end manufacturing, transportation, all over the board, where these different companies, we all share the same issues when it comes to entrepreneurism, is what we found. And that's really helped all of us grow and do that experience share. So I think, from a diversity perspective, 100%, expanding those circles.
Yeah, agreed. Evans?
Not anything super different, except for just the way that we go about it. It's a very intentional effort. I mean, we do very focused external recruiting, and we are looking for places. I mean, we have intentional efforts to recruit underrepresented founders, like I said, that we define as women and people of color and military veterans. We make, we spend a ton of time from in the 3 months before and all during the summer, reaching out to people and tapping into those networks, and then getting people who have been through the program, because we've had so many underrepresented founders, tapping into their networks and lending us their privilege and their voice to the story about who and how this has been impactful for them. And then we work really hard at trying to make sure that, we use the metric of the demographic of the area to try to make the groups that we put together, the boards, the groups of mentors, the people who are working on the strategy, we use the metric of the demographic of the area to try to hold ourselves accountable. We have work to do for sure, but to Brad's point, getting the numbers towards more of what the demographic in this area looks like is what we've been working towards. So whenever there are choices to be made about new seats at the table, new mentors, who do we connect with? It's, we have the metrics of the demographics from that Techstars report about what the demographics of this area are, and we try to use that as our measure.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, I don't see Oz, but we had a discussion with Oz pretty recently about board seats and about who really is sitting at the table as these discussions happen. And if I'll just encourage all the people on the call, if your organization isn't actively looking for people to sit at the table on your boards and on your advisory groups, then that's, as Tim said, that's how you expand your network of relationships. And so I encourage you that. Pete, you're off mute again.
Yeah, so the diversity, I think that this is obviously an issue that it is across the country, and I think some regions, and I belong to a bunch of CIOs forum across the country, and they're all talking about this, especially when it comes to cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Of the great jobs available, yet if take a look at the candidates that we get, they're normally the same. Okay, you don't have people of color, you don't have women at all applying for some of these jobs. And so some CIOs have made it intentionally to go down to middle school now, because what we're hearing is that by the time they reach middle school, they've already kind of decided where they want to go. High school is too late. You have to get down to the middle school level and really talk about what's available, because I think there's still something being said about technology or men jobs, and not female. And I think that's so wrong. So I think CIOs in California are doing a very good job of purposely getting in front of people to get into organization the unserved, underserved, to say, here's an opportunity, and making it intentionally. And I think so more than I've seen in the Northeast. I think that the California is doing a good job of that, and we can emulate some of those things.
Right. All right, well, I think we're getting near the end here. We do technically have more time, but I don't see a lot happening on the chat. If there's any other folks who want to sort of weigh in and offer some thoughts, we can keep going. But if not, then I'll ask maybe Dan Bell to come back and chat a little bit about what's next. Just while Dan's getting back, I do think we've heard some interesting things today. I am very passionate about getting some of the big organizations better engaged. I think there are some nuts and bolts ways we can do that. I think there's just a lot of passion involved in expanding our networks to not just improve diversity, but to improve the functioning of the ecosystem thereby. So those are sort of the messages. Again, I want to make sure everybody knows, as I said at the beginning, we've made a tremendous amount of progress in the roughly 30 years I've been doing this stuff. And there was a time back there when it was me and Dan and 2 or 3 others who could say entrepreneurship in a sentence without embarrassing ourselves. Now there's thousands of us, and I think that's a good thing. So with that, I'll hand it maybe back to Dan. Evans, you want to say something quick?
Yeah, I was going to say, did you see the question that I put in there from Rob? Did we answer that? I just want to make sure, because you.
Yeah, I saw it. I wasn't sure what to do with it. He asked about the historic returns and their mandates and drivers for success, basically. And I think certainly, Evans, you and Monique mentioned, being data driven. I think there's been a lot of measurements that have been going on about how this stuff really does create economic impact. If there's others who want to weigh in and talk about sort of how we look back in time and see what those drivers were and how we can do better, I'd be glad to hear it.
I'm a fan of the Startup Communities and Startup Community Way, the follow-on book. I would say a couple of major features are, number one, that there's not I would say it's even more fluid than this, but it's a recipe, not a playbook for areas. It's not as if you can take what worked in one city or one community and just plug and play and, plug in a whole bunch of things, and presto, you have a gaming system that works, and integrates with everything. So I would say, keeping that in mind, there's some basic things, which is lots of points of access, which is, sort of what Star Wheel is focused on, what in-person meetings are focused on, community building, mentorship, connecting people, creating community. That stuff is really sticky. So flat hierarchies, easier ways to get connected, people lending their networks, not needing to vet every single connection because that you're the gatekeeper. That stuff, I think, is thematically across the board, makes people feel like there's a way to succeed and lean into these resources that Tim has referred to. Finding founder-focused people and then becoming one. So the flatness of that hierarchy, to Tim's point, that you would be amazed how much you could help someone with just your business experience, just saying, blocking a certain amount of your calendar to reach out and connect with people and offer your time. And not every single half an hour is perfect, but you're paying it to the future. You're not paying it to the immediate. Like, it's a give first mentality. That stuff becomes really, really powerful and self-propagating, and you often get way more out of it than you give. So those are things that are pretty consistent. Corporates, governments, and entrepreneur support organizations knowing that really their job is as facilitators. Like, we're not the story. Right. We're facilitators for your story and your connections if you're a founder. So I would say those are things that are thematically clear and evident in successful ecosystems, be they, Indiana or Austin. Then I think there's really quickly feeling like there are ways to find some capital that you can, a way to raise capital, whatever it is, third-party capital, friends and family kind of capital, debt capital, banks, SBIRs, that kind of granting that doesn't require gobs and gobs of paperwork or geographic handcuffs, because people still, when all the things are organized around how many people do I actually have working for my company sitting in this zip code, that's not how technology companies grow and scale.
Yeah.
So that kind of innovative thinking, those are things that are thematically around, historically accurate characteristics that are present in ecosystems. There are more, but those are some that are the quickest wins.
Yeah, that's good. That's probably a good way to wrap this up. As I said at the beginning, I specifically didn't want to try to define what an ecosystem is, but Dan, I think that might be something that we should maybe have another one of these discussions. But what are the key things? I give a seminar on this overseas, and Evans just gave us, the 45-second dump on it. It's good stuff. So Dan, maybe we want to talk at some point about just what an ecosystem is and how all the pieces fit together and how do you pay it forward. So all those things could be a really good next step for some of this. So
I agree.
Dan, with that, I'll pass it off to you. And
thanks, Marty. You just hit the nail on the head. What's the next step? There was great information provided, great feedback from all panel participants, and good questions. And we've been around on this before, and unless we organize and start getting tactical in terms of how we're going to introduce this or expand this innovation economy in the region, meetings like this and conversations like this will just tend to be forgotten. So I think that the people on this panel today were all fantastic, yourself included, Marty. And I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't say that, but I mean it. And I'll loop around with you, and I think we'll start to map out what's the next step with this group and expanding the group, and how can we put things in practice. More so, not to suggest that we're not as a region, but as we're all sitting here on the call, we believe that we have to turn the corner, and this is a good opportunity to do so. So with that, hello, David. David Perkins, the president of HRIC. You were on the call, David. Do you have anything you want to add to the conversation before we wrap it up?
Just very briefly, just wanted to say thanks for the panelists for hosting a great conversation, and I'm really I was very encouraged by what I heard today, and I'm really looking forward to following up with some of the participants to have some further discussions. And I would invite, if anyone has input for the newly elected president of HRIC on what HRIC as an organization can do for our community, I would really like to receive those inputs. So I think currently you probably all have Dan's contact info as part of getting to this event. But if I could volunteer, his passing me your inputs, I would really love to get in touch with you personally to have some of those discussions. A number of you already know me, and I guess very quickly for those of you who don't, I'm David Perkins, and newly elected into the HRC president seat. Formerly, the career professional defense technology, became entrepreneur, became director of ODU's Innovation Center, and currently an independent consultant and mentor to a number of startups, both inside and outside of Hampton Roads. So this is an exciting time, exciting conversation. So just thanks again for leading a good one, Marty, and for Dan for setting it up.
Thanks a lot, David. Appreciate your comments. So unless there's any closing comments from anyone, again, I want to thank the panelists. I want to thank all participants who joined the call and hung with us. And everybody stay healthy, safe, warm, and watch for more communications from us.
Great.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, Dan, you have something this week, right? Thursday,
we do have a critical mass at Keegan's in Virginia Beach Town Center. Everybody's welcome to attend and social distance and mask up, and we'll have some of our board members there, and several other people have registered, but unfortunately I won't be able to make it. I've got out-of-town visitors coming in, although that's a good reason for them to not, but we're stuck with that. But that's our event. And then in short order, we'll have February's. I believe we have a couple different events coming up in February. Tech Tuesday will be a discussion on the regional fiber ring. And we're also putting together a special session, 5 sequential days on a given week in February from the U.S. Patent Office to provide some training. That's one of the things Marty and I have talked about with others, that what is missing, what is missing in our region is a higher number of usable patents on new technology. And so this could be informative and educational for those that might be sitting in a position to patent something. So we've got some good things coming up. And then of course, what we have coming forth from this call, I believe will be very, very good as well. And everybody on our panel here and some of our attendees will, I'm sure, all have a chance to participate. So I look forward to that as well. Any other questions? All good? All right. Thank you all. Enjoy. Bye-bye.